A few years ago? Was it a few years ago already? I can't remember. Maybe it's a year ago. Maybe it's a few years ago. Maybe it's a few months ago. I made a cover of Chopin's Nocturne. Cover. Chopin's Nocturne, Opus 9, number 2. I was brought up in a classical school, so I really enjoy playing classical pieces. And I love them. I love the tune, I love the harmony, I love the nuances and little details that they've put into it. And sometimes I like to change it up a bit and to make it my own interpretation, so to speak. I know a lot of classical people, classical musicians, they don't like people changing the songs that much, but I like it, so don't get too angry about the stuff that I'm going to talk about in this video. What I'm going to talk about is, some of you guys have watched that video of me playing a jazz version of Opus 9 number 2, the Nocturne, and you've asked me how I did it. So I just want to maybe walk through a little bit of tips that you can do, and share with you the lead sheet, share with you the chord sheet that I have, and share with you a little bit of a transcription of what I've done with you, and so that you could play it for your own leisure and maybe take some of these principles and apply them to your own pieces that you like, and maybe some classical pieces you like if you want to experiment with that. I think I played something wrong there, yeah. Ooh. Anyway, that's the original. What I did is something like this. Let me give you a couple of tips of what I did there. The first tip I have for you is 2/5. 2/5 is the sort of like the jazz language, the jazz version of the dominant to 1 cadence. This is the jazz. It's just that a jazz idiom, and whenever you sort of put a 2/5 and sort of reharmonize it a bit, add some extensions, it's gonna bring you to more of a jazz idiom, jazz language. And this is what I did here. So originally, in the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the bar 7 of the piece, it was simply a B flat 7 with a sus chord, like that, going to B flat 7, going to 1, which is a dominant to 1. But whenever you have these sort of things in your piece, what you can do is you can squeeze a 2 in before that 5 chord. Originally, it would sound like this. Right, here's the B flat sus, and then here's the B flat 7. Right, then what you can do is on that first B flat 7 sus chord, you can put an F minor there. The 2 going to 5, 1. So whenever you input 2 5 1s again, it's gonna bring you a little bit more to the jazz era. Right. And when you add a little bit more extensions, perhaps. I don't know if I like that or not, but that's cool. And here's the E chord, E flat chord, with the extensions added, the 2 and the 6. second tip that I have for you, I think I mentioned this in a previous video as well, is the 5/7. Going from a 5/7 before the coming chord. So this is something that I've done a couple of times as well. If you look at bar 4, yeah, bar 4. This is something that Chopin did as well. Chopin in his version, he did this. So he did C7 to F minor. For him, that's a secondary dominant because C7 is not naturally occurring in an E flat major, right? E flat major doesn't have a C7 in it, but he put the C7, the secondary dominant, the 5/7 of F minor, and he went into there. And this is what I did as well. I did it here. So I have the chords a little bit different, and I'll explain that in a second. But here I did a G7. Going to C7. So that's a 5 relationship because I have a C7 and it's a 5th above C. And the C is a 5th above F minor, which is the next chord. So I have actually 2 chains of these. I have 5s, I have the G7, which is a 5 of C7, which is a 5 of F minor 7. And when you chain them together, it's going to end up changing a lot of the chords before that, right? Yeah. On a related note, maybe this is a 2.5 tip, or maybe this is the third tip, maybe, is instead of putting the 5/7, you can put a half step above before going to the next chord. And this is related, if you want to get super theoretical about it, this is the tritone substitution. There's probably a lot of YouTubers that can explain this, musicians that can explain this as well if you look it up. Basically the concept is instead of going a 5 up, preceding your chord, what you can do is you can do a half step up. You can put a chord a half step above your chord coming, and you can resolve it down like this. So for example, if you just theoretically, if you have a C chord, right, you want to precede that C chord. If you wanted to do it with a 5, you would go like this. And if you want to put some extensions, right? But you can do it with a D flat as well. Right? Here's the G, here's the D flat. It's just different sound, but sometimes when you do this half step motion as opposed to the 5 motion, you get really exotic chords and you would get really cool chords happening. And this is what I did for a lot of this as well. If you take a look at, the 2/5 that we added right to the end of the phrase, this part. Right, so we already did a 2/5 to the 1. The 2 is F minor and B flat. Now, preceding that F minor, I could definitely add a 5 above, which will bring me to something like this. That C chord, C7, is a 5 of F. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5/7. But I can precede that as opposed to a 5 above. I can precede that with a half step above, and that brings me to a G flat chord. And all you have to figure out really here is take a look at the melody, take a look at bass note, and see what chord work with those two. And maybe in the future video I can make one that talks about what kind of notes work with what. But the concept is basically with every single melody note and every single bass note, there is gonna be a chord that works. Like in terms of theory wise, like no matter which melody note and which bass note, there is going to be a chord that works as long as you know where to find them. So that's what I did. I did instead of C7 to F, I did a half step, G flat to F. And what I did there is I did this chord. Well, what is this? If you take a look, this is the G flat majors on the bottom. Here's the G flat major 7, G flat major 9, and this is 3, 4. But it's not a normal 4, this is a sharp 4 because 4 normally would be here. Anyway, so that's what I did before that chord. So and then I combine that with the 5th idea from the G flat. Where do I go? I could go a half step above, or I can go a fifth above. And in that case, I did a fifth above. So that would bring me to D flat in the chord before. Here I did a D flat major 9, because the melody is on the 9. Melody is on the sharp 11 here, the G flat. And we put all that together, that's what it sounds like. Last tip I have for you, and this is actually really related to what we've talked about. As you can sort of see from what I've been doing, is a lot of times when we reharmonize, because we are always going to see, okay, what is this chord, and we're going to think about what the chord is before that, right? So we want to say, for example, we wanted to land on E flat, we can add a 2-5 before that, and that's what I did to the ending, 2-5. And then, well, okay, I have a 2, which is an F minor, and then I think, okay, do I want a half step above or do I want a fifth above? Okay, I did a half step above on the G flat, and then do I want a half step above or a fifth above? And I did a fifth above. As you can see, when we do reharmonization like this, the way that I approach it sometimes is, instead of working from the beginning to the end, you have to work from the end to the beginning. You work from a place where you feel like, okay, I want to land the chord here. And in my case, I wanted to land the chord at the end of the little section. I wanted to land it on E flat there. And from there, then I simply work backwards. And when you work backwards like this, there's only really a couple of options. There's a 2-5, which we talked about. There's this 5-7, and then there's the half step. And when you keep working backwards and backwards and backwards and backwards like this, then all of a sudden, when you get to the very beginning of the sequence of chords, you have something completely different. And this is what I did from the end of that phrase all the way up to, I think, bar 3. This is all explainable with a half step or a 5-7 or 2-5 motion, and I got it all the way to the bar 3, and that brought me to a completely different place. On bar 3, or for the P's, it's bar 2. This note here, I have an A minor 7 flat 5. Chopin has a C7. A minor 7 flat 5, C7. So that's completely two different places. Well, it's not too far off, but it's different enough. How did I get there? I basically just worked backwards from the end. So we had, right, ending on an E flat, and I did a 2-5 to go to there. Right, okay, then I thought, okay, what can I do before the 2? I did a half step up, and then, which brought me to G flat, and I did a fifth up. Well, okay, then let's see. A 2 chord, and then G flat, and then D flat. And then now, what do I do? What I did is I just did a series of half steps going down. Just climb down with the bass note. That brought me to D flat here, to G flat. Right? And that's how I landed on that F minor, the 2 chord here, as opposed to the original in Chopin's is a B flat 7. I landed on an F minor because I worked backwards, you see. And then, well, okay, I have an F minor. Then I just keep working backwards. I did a fifth above. We talked about this, and I did another fifth above. Right? And then I just did 2 half steps above. So I went to A flat, and then 1 more half step above. I went to A minor 7, and that's how I landed there. A minor 7. Half step down, A flat, change the quality, half step down, G7, fifth down, another fifth down, and then bass note count, half step, half step, half step, half step, brings me to a D flat, a fifth down, G flat, half step, 2, 5. That's all it is, really. It's a little bit more mechanical than maybe what you would expect, but this is one way that I go about it. The other way is sort of just feeling it out, and there's no logic to anything behind that. But I sort of use a combination of these things, let my ear guide me. But you sort of see the approach, right? That final is you work from the ending, you decide where you want to land on, and then you figure out the chord before, Is it a 5 chord? Is it a 2-5? Is it a 5 chord? Is it a half step above? And then you just sort of go from there, and then maybe you'll find out end up on something you like. And of course, there's a lot of decisions that you have to make, right? How long is each chord? What chord quality is it? And you know, so on and so forth. So there is some artistic choices in it, and a lot of the times it's trial and error. It's not gonna be, oh, I have this formula, of course I'm gonna plug in and it's gonna work all the time. So there's a lot of decisions you have to make. Hopefully this is something that maybe gives you a little bit of new things to think about. Take those 3 tips, 2/5, 5/7, half step, and then the bonus tip, I guess, thinking from the end onwards, from the backwards, whatever you call it, if you're thinking, starting from the end. Take those tips, apply it to the pieces that you like to play, and then maybe grab the score and PDF. If you are my Patreon, if you support me on Patreon, this is something that my thank you note to you, my thank you to you. You get access to all the scores and PDFs that I have. You can grab those, practice it, and yeah, and hopefully this is something that you enjoy listening to, enjoy playing, enjoy listening to me talking about. And if you like stuff like this, let me know in the comment section. Leave me a like button. Don't leave me a like button. Leave me a like. Follow this channel. I have more stuff coming. And hopefully I'll see you next time.